everyone. I'm David Wood, and welcome to David and Sean's Excellent Adventures. And I am here with my co-host. Introduce yourself.
I'm Sean Ellis. David and I are both action adventure novelists, and I do a little side writing for magazine articles in survival and backwoods preparedness magazines. And we are just two guys who love all things adventure.
And today we are going to talk about a famous adventure video game that has become a movie. So tell us about Uncharted. Kick us off with kind of the video games in the background here.
All right. So behind me is Nathan Drake, the hero protagonist of the Uncharted video game series. There are a total of 4 original games in the series, and there's also a spin-off adventure, which I'll talk about in a minute. These games debuted, I don't have the original release date in front of me right now, but they debuted several years ago with Uncharted, Drake's Fortune. The premise of the story is that Nathan Drake is a treasure hunter and a bit of a rogue who, with his friend Victor Scully, is going on a quest to find treasure. Drake takes his name from Sir Francis Drake, who he believes is one of his ancestors, although that's a matter of some debate in the stories. And basically, these games they're shooters for the most part, third-person shooters, but there's a lot of parkour for the character. There are a lot of puzzles to solve, and they're exactly the kind of video game that you would like to play if you like video games about the kind of movies that we all like to watch. For the video game nuts out there, the game is pretty intuitive. You shoot your gun at the bad guys. There's a lot of quick time events, which means a lot of scenes where you have to mash a button to escape a bad guy, or you have to tilt your things almost like Temple Run. And so that can be a little challenging. There's one particularly tricky puzzle I remember where you're running across a bridge, and then halfway across, the camera view completely flips, and now you're running towards the screen. And so it's like, just like that, the controls completely reverse, and you have to figure out how to do that, and then that flips back again. So that's one that definitely was very frustrating for me as a gamer. But the games themselves are a lot of fun to watch. The cutscenes are very cinematic. They're almost as good as a movie. In fact, you can find on YouTube where people have cut the cinematic cutscenes out and spliced them together, and it's like watching an adventure movie. So what more can I say about Uncharted? A lot of people have wanted to see Uncharted made into a movie for a long time. There was, a few years ago, there was discussion about trying to bring Nathan Fillion from Castle and Firefly to the role. And he does bear, as you can see, he does bear a passing resemblance to the character Nathan Drake. But he just aged out of the character. There's no way he can pull that off. He's almost old enough to play Sully now. However, that didn't stop him from starring in a short fan film, which was made in 2018, where you kind of get to see what might have been. So I definitely recommend that. It's a lot of fun to watch, but it does pretty much underscore the fact that he's too old for the part.
We'll see if we can find a link and share it maybe for that.
Yes,
for the fan
put
film.
Put that up. However, we did finally get our Uncharted movie this year, and I will let you talk about that, David.
All right. Uncharted, I wasn't sure what to expect. It stars Tom Holland, who is Spider-Man, and he's a very small guy, which seems a little funny to me in adventure movies because we're accustomed to somebody who at least has some physicality, typically. But I thought he did a very good job, and I thought the movie was surprisingly a lot of fun. There are some traditional tropes like the missing relative. He has a lost brother. He grew up in foster care. He had a brother who disappeared, but has been sending him postcards that might or might not have clues or mysteries attached to them. And so one of the mysteries is what happened to his brother. We're not sure if he's dead. We're not sure if he isn't. And but that's carried out throughout the movie into the post-credit scenes. I like that there was a lot of humor in it, both through their dialogue and physical comedy at times. One little scene that I really got a kick out of is Tom Holland did a flying sidekick into the chest of a great big guy, and he bounced off, which is what would actually happen if you weigh 120 pounds and try to use martial arts or, the types of kicks that require sheer force on a really big, solid person. And I've said it before in our conversation. Sometimes movies will treat martial arts like magic, and that can be fun. But the reality is, I don't know that Bruce Lee would have done very well against, a modern day heavyweight MMA champion or something like that. As good as he was, physics is a thing. And so while Nathan is a decent fighter, he is not a big, heavy duty, physical guy who can knock people around. He's definitely not Jack Reacher. And so, but that was a lot of fun, but it creates some unique challenges, and he has to rely on his wits. There was some nice twists in there. I like what they did with the villains. You start out with one villain, and then there are some twists in there, and I don't want to spoil the surprises. And one downside, I say downside, you will really have to suspend disbelief in certain sections. I thought they did okay with the plotting. There were times during the course of the movie where I or my wife or my daughter would say, wait a minute, what about? But then they ended up explaining it in a reasonably satisfactory way. But toward the end, again, without giving away anything, the climax, there's some stuff that is like, that wouldn't have happened that way. But it's okay as long as you just accept that this one thing, just let it go, and it's a lot of fun. So I was really pleased with the movie. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. And as I understand, there's probably going to be a sequel. They're looking to turn it into a franchise.
Well, we need more action adventure franchises for sure. Coming to this as somebody who really enjoyed the games, I've loved them all. I want to talk first about the continuity with the games. There's a little bit of a continuity difference between the game series. If you know the games in Uncharted 3, there is a whole sequence at the beginning where young Nathan Drake is roaming the streets of Cartagena and apparently a runaway. I'm not sure if it's ever really explained, but he's trying to get his hands on a very special ring that belonged to Sir Francis Drake. And in the process, he meets Victor Sully. And that is the origin of their relationship in the game universe. So the movie provides an alternate story, and not only for the friendship, but also for the ring. Now that said, most of the rest of the source material is pretty faithfully kept with Nathan's brother. He shows up in the fourth game, and they reunite and go on a treasure hunt together. The character of Chloe Fraser is very important to the series. She's not, this might be a spoiler, although maybe they won't stick to it, but she's not his main love interest in the games. She's more like the ex-girlfriend who kind of shows up and causes trouble. A little like Jade Hara, really. But I thought overall, the casting and the inclusion of Chloe in this was a really good kind of a treat for the fans of the game. Let's see, the stunts and especially like that big opening scene, even though it kind of looked a little hokey in places with CGI.
Yes, there were certain parts where it was definitely video game action when he's flying through the air and going full Legolas on some of this stuff.
So, but that's very true, faithful to the spirit of the games. The games have all kinds of things like that. In fact, there's a lot more shooting in the game, but I think that's just the thing that happens in video games. But I really liked the stunt work when it was not so obvious. I felt like it really was a decent video game. In fact, this is going to sound like I'm damning it with faint praise, but it's not the worst movie adaptation of a video game, not by a long shot.
Yeah. Well, there aren't that many good ones. I worked up a top 5 list, and it was difficult to come up with 5 worth mentioning, I thought, at least if you're sticking to adventure.
As a fan of the games, I feel like I didn't need a young Nathan Drake story. I would rather have seen a more mature, and only a little bit more mature, because he's a young character. And I didn't really care for Mark Wahlberg as Sully. He would not have been my first pick for that role. But I thought most of the other casting choices were great. I love the actor for Chloe, and her name escapes me, but the villainess, who the actress was formerly in Sabrina for Netflix. So she's lots of fun in that role. So overall, I mean, I'd give it a 3 out of 5 stars. And I'm encouraged by the talk that there's going to be a sequel. Which reminds me that we skipped our adventure news of the week. So maybe that's a good point to segue into that.
Oh, I'm not finished talking Uncharted
Oh,
yet.
all right. We'll edit this out.
um, Question about Sully. Did you feel like the character was written true to the game and it was just Wahlberg filling that role that you didn't love, or did they make some changes in the character
Uh,
himself?
I think that the way it was written is very true to the characters. Nathan is, like I say, he's a bit of a rogue. He's does his share of second story work, and so it was totally believable that. And Sullivan is definitely that guy who you're never sure if he's going to sell you out. Especially in the first game, it's like there's some scenes where it looks like he straight up betrayed Nathan, and then of course he doesn't. It's all part of the plan or whatever. But so yeah, he's definitely has a lot of moral ambiguity in the character, and I think that was portrayed well. I just didn't quite. I remember reading a review early on that said that he's not playing the character; he's just being Mark Wahlberg, and I kind of felt like that was true. I think maybe an older actor too would have. I know they're going for that young Nathan Drake thing. The mustache at the end, the in the credit scene where he shows up and has the mustache, that was actually a treat for the fans. I think that's definitely one of his signature looks.
Yeah, you mentioned the moral ambiguity, and that's something I thought was strong because he said, Nathan, he's a thief, pickpocket. Sully, hidden agendas. Chloe, same deal. There are a lot of characters where you have questions about what they're actually up to, and you think you know, then you're not sure, then you know again. And I thought they did a good job with that as well.
Yeah, and also that sense that, despite the fact that he's kind of in it for the gold, he also really loves history, and that's true to the character, and it's really what makes him more interesting than just a soldier of fortune character.
What did you think about the opening scene? Not in the technical aspects of it, but the fact that they chose to open the movie with something from the middle of the movie just to set the stage. And they give us a piece of this action scene, and then we find out what's going on when we catch up to it.
That's straight out of the games. Uncharted 2 starts with the scene very much like that, where there's Nathan kind of comes to in a daze, and he looks around, and he's in a train car, but the train car is vertical, and you realize that he's in this train car that's hanging off the edge of a bridge that's collapsed, and he's got to climb up these train cars to escape, and the cars are slowly falling away. It's if you get the chance, watch the video playthrough of just the opening sequence of Uncharted 2, and it's perfect. And so they kind of were definitely channeling that. And I think there's a similar scene in Uncharted 3 with the cargo nets too, but I'm not positive about that. But that foreshadowing of here's what's going to happen later on, and then you jump back to the early adventure. That's definitely an homage to the games. And just as storytelling goes, it's a good trick to use, especially if there's a lot of setup at the beginning of your story, a lot of exposition, and you just want to start with a bang. I've done it in a few books.
Yeah, that's true because otherwise the movie would not have felt like an action movie until you got pretty far into it. So yeah, I think that was probably a good idea. Overall, when I was just reflecting on why I like the movie, I think it reminds me a lot of the things that I love to include in my Dane Maddock books in particular. The history, as you mentioned, is really important to me. That's something I love. And even if you do an alternate take on history, put a twist to it, it's still a lot of fun. There's puzzle solving, there's the action, there's really cool locations, beautiful shots in Barcelona, for example. It was Barcelona, wasn't it?
Yes.
They went to. Really enjoyed those. And of course, where the climax happens is really cool and well done. So I love the visuals as well. So overall, thought it was a lot of fun. Like I said, it's not, going to change anyone's life, but I think it's worthwhile if you love adventure and just go in with the attitude that you're going to have fun with it.
One thing, and again, I encourage. I know people. If you're not a gamer, you probably aren't going to play these games. But if you can watch the YouTube's playthroughs, you're going to see that the games, at least the first three games, they delve a little bit more into the paranormal in ways that would definitely appeal to fans of the Dane Maddock books and others. Not so much like magic, but for example, in the first one, there are some creatures that I would say are kind of like the creature in Relic, or sort of
Okay.
a vampire hybrid type evolved human monster. And then in the second one, there's Yeti, and I think in the third one they find no wait, that's the second one where they find Shambhala. So they get more into some of those older legends that have some paranormal aspects to it. And I was kind of hoping for something like that in the game or in the movie, and but it's probably better that they didn't.
I have found that it turns off a lot of readers, which is a shame because I like those limited paranormal or supernatural aspects in the Indiana Jones movies, for example, or in the Librarian franchise. And so I like to put a little bit of that in the Matic books. It's not tremendous, but it's nice to think that a biblical artifact does have some power, that the Ark of the Covenant could kill the bad guy who looks inside and things like that. So that's the sort of thing that I enjoy. But I did find that even early on in some of my reviews, the people didn't like it because, I thought I was reading a thriller, then I get to an end and it's a fantasy book. Well, okay. But yeah, that is the criticism. And I've probably limited my audience some by doing that. But at the same time, I feel like I'm connecting with the people who love exactly this sort of story. All right. Well, that wraps up our talk on Uncharted. What is happening in news this week?
So I don't really have any real life adventure news from the last week, but there's a ton of adventure fiction news. So I'm just going to run through it. We're recording this on Tuesday, September 6th. I'm not sure when you're going to see it, but today is a huge release day for book releases. You may not realize this, but Tuesday is the day when books are released. Today, Stephen King's new book, Fairy Tale, is coming out, and that's not exactly an adventure story, but we all love Stephen King. There's also a new entry in Clive Cussler's Oregon Files. It's called Hellburner. And this one's personal. My good friend Ryan Steck, who is the real book spy, he's a reviewer and editor, and he has his debut thriller, Fields of Fire. It's
Nice.
kind of a modern Western set in Montana with a former Marine who is facing bad guys. And he originally didn't want to call it a modern Western, but it has definitely got hits all those Western buttons. But it's a lot of fun. Of course, all things Montana and Wyoming are pretty popular right now. So I hope that lots of people will buy it and make it a bestseller for my buddy Ryan. In a little other adventure fiction news, today we learned of the death of Peter Straub, who's a horror and mystery writer, also co-wrote The Talisman with Stephen King, which is probably one of King's most beloved works. And it's got some adventure elements in it. Even if you don't like horror stories, it's definitely an adventure worth reading. And the good news about that is that they're currently developing it as a series for Netflix, and the Duffer Brothers, who gave us Stranger Things, which owes a lot to The Talisman, they're working on the script right now. So hopefully we will see a TV series version of The Talisman by next year or the year after.
Nice. I never really thought about parallels between Stranger Things and Talisman. That makes a lot of sense. Flipping between worlds and things like that.
So I take it Talisman is one of your favorites too.
Yes, it's been a very long time since I read it, but I loved it. And I read it a couple of times back in the day, back in probably the early to mid 90s.
It'll be interesting to see whether they keep the setting, which it was set in the 80s, the original book, or if they try to update it for the modern audience. The other bit of news, you sent me this. We have the first piece of music from the Indiana Jones 5 score has been released. John Williams, the composer, has given us a preview. You can find that on YouTube. The piece is called Helena's Theme, and it's the music that will accompany the appearance of Helena, the film's leading lady, who's going to be played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. So I have a feeling we're going to get lots of little tidbits leaked over the course of the next year that will get us ready for this. That's all the adventure news I've got.
All right.
Are you ready to do the top 5?
Yes, ready. We'll do some of these. Do we want to do movies first or games first?
Well, I thought we could trade off.
Oh, yeah.
I decided I would, since I'm the gamer, I would do the top 5 adventure video games. And David, what are you going to do?
I'm going to do top 5 movies based on adventure games.
Okay. So I'll start with, and again, I'm going to go gamer geek here a little bit, and I might lose some of the people here. But from there's a series called Far Cry. It's up to, I believe, 7 or 8 different games now. Um, they're kind of survival games where your character is in an exotic environment, has to survive various um, challenges from the environment. You have to do some hunting sometimes. You have to do some crafting. Um, but I like this series because some of the locations are perfect for when I need to get in the mood to write a certain kind of story. So I was writing a couple of books that took place in Africa, and that brought me to the second Far Cry game, Far Cry 2, which is it's just I call it a gritty Conrad-esque adventure story. You're in a fictional Central African nation that's been, there's warlords fighting each other, and you just have to negotiate the world with take on different quests. And one of the neat things about this game is that periodically you'll have an attack of malaria, and you have to maintain a supply of malaria medication, or else, well, you're left vulnerable to the bad guys. So, for my number 5 adventure video game, Far Cry 2.
All right. My number 5 movie based on an adventure game is Lara Croft Tomb Raider. This is the first Tomb Raider movie. It starred Angelina Jolie, and it's the story of Lara going up against the Illuminati to find an artifact called the Triangle of Light. It's got a good cast. John Voight is in it. Ian Glenn and Daniel Craig all have parts in it. And it's fun. It's lighthearted. It's not super deep, but it's a lot of fun. And I did play, back when PlayStation was a thing, the first 3 Tomb Raider games. My wife and I would play them together. And there are elements that are a lot like the game. For example, it opens with an action scene where she's fighting it out with a robot. And then when the fight is over, you realize it's inside Croft Manor and this is her training session. And that is actually how you would start out the first Tomb Raider games, is take these training sessions there at Croft Manor to improve your skills and develop your climbing and jumping and shooting. So it gave you kind of a preview of what all Lara does. So light, fun film, nothing amazing, but it's worth your time if that's the kind of thing you like.
Well, as luck would have it, my number 4 pick for video adventure games is Tomb Raider 3. So I guess you know what I'm talking about. I picked this one because Tomb Raider 3 was my entry point to the Tomb Raider franchise. And what I liked, I went back and played the others afterward, and of course the graphics were much more rudimentary for those first couple games. But by Tomb Raider 3, I think they'd worked out a lot of the graphic problems, and it just had a great look. The game opens in India, and so everything's very green and lush, which was kind of nice after some of the other games which were in the desert. The plot revolved around finding these pieces of a meteorite which had mystical powers. And what I liked most about Tomb Raider 3 was that, unlike the other games, you had a choice at one point which where you wanted to go next. There were 3 different games. You had to play 3 different parts of the relic you had to find, but you could choose: do I want to go to London? Do I want to go? I can't remember where the other locations were, but that gave it some just a little bit of freedom of choice, which for an early video game. And I think the Tomb Raider games came out in, I want to say, early 2000s, or I should say Tomb Raider 3 came out, I believe, in 2000 or 1999. So, these were the games that eventually got us to where we are with Uncharted today. So I'm curious to see what you like better than Tomb Raider.
Well, I just had to put a bunch of Tomb Raider in here because there are not many adventure games based or movies based on games. Number 4 is Assassin's Creed. And this one, and I do not play the game, and so I'm not great with the background, but it's about a member of a guild of assassins. It takes place in the past, and the enemies are apparently Templars. And as I understand it, I haven't even seen the movie, so I'm just basing it on the ratings and reviews that people got. But they like the action, and as I understand it, it starts in the modern day and through some technology, maybe kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger's True Lies movie or something. We're able to see through the eyes of this person who is a descendant of the assassin. And we experience the adventure in the past as they look for the Apple of Eden, which is a MacGuffin that controls the free will of humankind. And like I said, I haven't checked it out yet, but people seem to like it pretty well. But there is apparently not going to be a sequel, or at least there are no plans for it in the near future, from what I could find.
I have played a couple of the Assassin's Creed games. I like them, but they're a bit much for me, and I tend to get frustrated by some of the puzzles and rage quit. But I saw part of the Assassin's Creed movie, and I don't know why I didn't finish it. Maybe I'll have to give that another look. For me, my number three adventure video game, and you're going to see that uh, I'm more or less working backwards through history. But this one, it's called Crimson Skies: High Road to Adventure. It was an Xbox game. Actually, I think may have been in the early 2000s, 2003 or 2004. The Crimson Skies games are set in sort of a pulpy diesel punk universe where there's lots of people have planes and helicopters and airships, and there's lots of adventure stories where you're flying around trying to do this or that. If you want to find that old-fashioned pulp vibe, kind of like in the movie Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, the Crimson Skies has it. I played it on Xbox, and I think maybe I played the first one on PlayStation 2. It's been many years. It's hard to find them now. You might be able to find them in online, but I think you could also probably find playthroughs on YouTube. But it's a lot of fun. Definitely, it speaks to that Doc Savage kind of world that you and I both like to write in.
Mhm. All right, my number three movie is Uncharted. I don't need to expound upon that other than to say I liked it for the reasons I mentioned, and I'm glad to see that they're talking about a sequel.
What's your number two?
Number two is Tomb Raider: Cradle of Life. This is the second Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider movie, and in this case, she is going after, and good golly, I can't read my own
I think that
writing
one
now.
was the Pandora's Box.
Yes, and wow, I was looking at the wrong line. No wonder I was confused. Yes. Um, Pandora's Box. Oh, I wanted to mention that in the first Tomb Raider movie, one of the things I liked, I loved locations, and they went to Angkor Wat, which was really cool. In this one, Kilimanjaro is one of the locations where we see them. And it's another fun movie. I liked it a little bit better than the first one. And some other good actors. We have Gerard Butler was in it, and Kieran Hines. I think that's how you say his name, but he's been in a lot of stuff, Game of Thrones, Rome, you name it. One of my favorites. So another fun one if you like the slightly lighthearted adventure stories.
For my number two, I kind of did this is a video game based on a movie franchise. I talked about it a little last time. It's Indiana Jones and Fate of Atlantis. It's an old school adventure game in the sense of it's more of like some of those classic text games that we played back when computers were very young. It's more of a puzzle adventure. You're going places, you're putting things together, but it's still a lot of fun and definitely has elements that would lead to some of the better video games that we have now. I also have a list of honorable mention real quick. I just wanted to go through. These are games that I recommend they have adventure aspects, but they're not truly adventure games. The first one, I'm going to mention two. First is Red Dead Redemption. It's a Western game. It takes place in the Old West, but it's that open world where you ride your horse or you go places and do stuff. It's a lot like the Far Cry games, only it's in the Old West. So if you like that Clint Eastwood vibe kind of Western, Red Dead Redemption. There's also a sequel, which was really, I think, a bestseller. The other one is Skyrim. Skyrim is a fantasy game, but if you play it, there's all kinds of treasure hunts. You're crawling around in crypts and things like that. So it's got a lot of adventure elements to it. And that's my honorable mention. Did you have any honorable mention?
Nope. I was lucky to come up with five to put on the list.
Well, let's hear what's your number one video game turned
All
movie.
right. Big shock, Tomb Raider 2018, which is the newest of the Tomb Raiders. I thought it was a great story. Obviously, the effects are a lot better. They didn't feel the need to give her fake boobs in this one. So, and maybe that's why it didn't do as well, because she's more of a lean, athletic Lara Croft. And I really loved, especially the temple toward the end and all the things when they get on location. And even getting there were some fantastic special effects. And it is based on one of the newer, I say newer, at that time, one of the more recent Lara Croft video games where they had really developed the story. And in this one, the backstory is Himiko, who is a mythic Japanese queen. We're looking for her tomb, and the enemy is the Trinity. And there are some really cool twists throughout. And of course, you have the backstory of her missing father and trying to figure out what happened to him, which leads her on the adventure. And she's someone who's kind of down on her luck and difficult to work with, kind of resisting her her family and her heritage. So I thought it was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, at this point, there aren't any plans for a sequel. The studio that had the rights let them expire. So supposedly the video game company is looking for an opportunity for more. But who's to say if it will directly follow this one? But it was a fun movie as well. The star is Alicia Vikander, and Walton Goggins, is that his name? Was one of the villains, and I really like him. His last name's definitely Goggins, but I'm drawing a blank on his first name.
I saw that movie it's been a couple of years. I seem to recall thinking that it was a good movie, but it wasn't a good Tomb Raider movie. And that's just me being a toxic fan. It wasn't what I wanted from the character. I felt like they went in really different directions with the character. A little disappointing, but as far as adventure movie goes, it really stood on its own. It did have lots of great adventure. Well, my number one action adventure video game. This is going to need to get in the Wayback Machine. It is Pitfall 2, Lost Caverns.
I didn't know there was a 2.
Back in if you remember Pitfall 1, you remember that it's a side-scrolling game where you have to run through the different screens, and there would be swamps that would appear. There would be alligators. You'd have to jump across their heads. There would be vines. You'd have to jump and grab a vine and swing over something. There were like logs that would roll along and crush you, or at least take away your life points. There were underground tunnels. You could go down into them, all trying to find treasures. Well, Pitfall 2 really expanded on that design. There was a little more vertical scrolling in it, so added some swimming and things like that. So I don't know that it's even, and you might find it at your Goodwill or something, an old cartridge of Pitfall 2. The Pitfall games were a lot of fun. They're never been made into a movie, but that doesn't mean it can't happen.
Hey.
So yeah, definitely the Wayback Machine. But it's these stories back when I was a kid. Just saw Indiana Jones, and I wanted to all things adventure. Pitfall, like Jungle Explorer. I'm there. That's take my money. So and our games are a lot more sophisticated now. They're much more like long form movies that you're interactive with, which is true of Uncharted, definitely. It's like playing a movie where you have to solve the puzzle to unlock the next scene. I think that we'll continue to see more games like Uncharted. The Tomb Raider, as you mentioned, I think Uncharted owes a lot to Tomb Raider, and I think maybe now I read that there's a spin-off game that's out there called Uncharted Lost Legacy, which focuses on Chloe Frazier's character. She's the main protagonist of that. And a lot of people talk about it's like Nathan Drake, but female. I'm like, well, wait a second, isn't that Lara Croft? It'd be fun to see where they go next.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's about it for our show today. If you want to visit our websites, you can find me at SeanEllisAuthor.com.
And I am at DavidWoodWeb.com. And if you have any thoughts on anything we've talked about, whether it's the Uncharted games, the movie, or any of our top 5 lists, or if you have suggestions of your own, leave them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.
Next time, I think we'll be revisiting a real life adventure that you and I had together, the Bear Grylls Survival Challenge. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but you can Google it. So until then, I'm Sean Ellis.
And I'm David Wood.
And here's to adventure.
See you next time.